Hello and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report on NTD television. I'm your host, Steve Lance. Here's a look at some of today's top stories. A defeat for the city of Boston. The Supreme Court today ruled on a dispute over flying a religious flag outside of Boston City Hall. We talked to the person who fought to fly the flag about what his victory means. The U.S. Embassy is now planning to move back into Ukraine's capital, and a group of lawmakers wrapped up their trip to the region earlier today. While back home, Congress is prepping to spend another $30 billion towards Ukraine. The Ohio Republican primary is tomorrow, and there's one Senate race that's capturing national attention. One of the frontrunners in the race joins us to weigh in on Nancy Pelosi's visit to Ukraine, as well as how he thinks his campaign will fare in the upcoming election. Title 42 comes to an end this month. The public health provision made it easier to send illegal immigrants back to Mexico during the COVID pandemic. Republicans and even some Democrats are worried that this could result in a surge of an estimated 18,000 illegal border crossings per day. But Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas says his department is prepared. Find out why as we bring you the story. The Supreme Court ruled today on a dispute involving flying a religious flag outside of Boston City Hall. The result proves to be a defeat for the city government and a victory for a Christian group. NTD's Iris Tao talks to the group's leader, who fought to fly the flag.
In a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court ruled Monday that the city of Boston violated the First Amendment when it refused to fly a Christian flag outside City Hall.
Again, we weren't surprised by the decision, but a little bit surprised by the 9-0 decision.
Boston has allowed dozens of private groups to raise their banners on a public flagpole. But when Hal Shurtleff's group applied in 2017 to fly a flag symbolizing Christianity, the city said no.
He said, please consider other secular flags. You just can't fly the Christian flag. And when I saw that sentence, I said, we have a case here that we should win.
The city told him that the separation of church and state wouldn't allow the flag to fly, but the High Court said Monday that argument doesn't fly. In his opinion, Justice Breyer wrote that Boston's flag-raising program does not express government speech. The government thus cannot discriminate based on religious viewpoint, which Breyer noted is exactly what Boston did in this case. Shurtleff, meanwhile, believes the city misunderstood the First Amendment, as many others have.
In fact, I'm hearing some outrageous things like high school principals, elementary school principals are telling children they can't bring candy canes because it's shaped like a J and it has a Christian allegory behind it. And it's totally ludicrous. And a lot of people just buy into it because they just don't know the Constitution and the First Amendment.
Shurtleff's organization works to teach individuals about the Constitution, but he said this case, which they fought for years, did something bigger.
We taught the whole country, and so people have to look at that First Amendment and say, no, it doesn't mean you can't say, God bless you, in a public building.
The Monday decision also favored the position taken by the Biden administration, which sided with Camp Constitution and argued that a flag-raising program is a public forum, just like an open mic night. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Officials today announced an end-of-the-month plan to move their embassy back to Ukraine's capital of Kyiv. And a group of representatives just finished up an unannounced trip to the region. The group, led by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, is the first official congressional delegation to have visited Ukraine following Russia's invasion. Congress this week is working on spending another $30 billion to assist Ukraine. This is in addition to the $14 billion they already spent in March.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi met with Poland's president today, wrapping up an unannounced weekend trip to Europe. She's the highest-ranking U.S. government official to visit war-torn Ukraine since the invasion began.
And so our commitment is to be there for you until the fight is done.
I am thankful for this. First of all, for this signal of powerful support of Ukraine, powerful support of the United States.
That's Zelensky's message to the first official U.S. congressional delegation to have visited Ukraine following Russia's invasion. Congressman Adam Schiff was part of that delegation.
If Russia can get away with this naked aggression, this invasion of their neighbor, what's to make us think they'll stop with Ukraine?
But will Russia get away with this? A head official at the U.S. Embassy hinting today that the war could be turning a corner.
I would say the message to Russia is you failed. Ukraine is still standing, the government is still functioning, and we're going back to Lviv first and then Kyiv to help the government.
She announced their plans to move the U.S. Embassy back to Ukraine's capital by the end of this month. Other Western countries have already moved their embassies back to Kiev. The U.S. diplomat says it's ramping up assistance to Ukraine and neighboring countries.
Just to note that we are significantly increasing what we're providing right now. We have given howitzers recently, which are quite powerful weapons, and over half of what we have told Ukraine we would give them are already in the country.
Congress already approved $14 billion in emergency aid to Ukraine in March, and is now working on another $33 billion package.
Melina, how's that money for Ukraine coming along in Congress, and what's the timetable for them to send that money over?
Well, Steve, sending this Ukraine aid is something that has gained bipartisan support, so it is likely to pass. But one of the roadblocks that we're seeing here is whether or not to tack on $10 to $20 billion more for COVID response. This is something that the White House wants Congress to do. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has supported this effort. Some other Democrats have supported this effort. But Republicans are threatening to block this Ukraine money if it includes that $10 to $20 billion more for COVID aid. And one of those reasons is because Senate Republicans want to force a vote in the Senate to extend Title 42. So these are some of the details that the Senate is working out right now, and we could expect a vote later this week, but it's more likely to come next week or even later. Steve, back to you.
NTD's Melina Wisecup reporting. Nearly 5.5 million people have fled Ukraine, and the First Lady will visit some of the refugees this weekend on Mother's Day. She'll meet with Ukrainian mothers and children in Romania and Slovakia, both countries which share borders with the war-torn country. And to assess Speaker Pelosi's trip and the U.S.'s involvement in the Ukraine-Russia war, our next guest is Ohio candidate for U.S. Senate, former Marine Corps veteran and former Ohio State Treasurer Josh Mandel. Josh Mandel, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Good to be on.
Josh, Nancy Pelosi visited Ukraine over the weekend. Some say she should have invited some of her Republican colleagues to show more bipartisan support for Ukraine. Others say it was a backup plan to potentially take away attention in case there was a gaffe at the White House Correspondents' Dinner with the president. In either case, what's your assessment of her trip?
I think she's just hyper-partisan. You know, there's so many issues in Washington that are automatically partisan issues. But, you know, supporting Ukraine does not have to be one of those. You know, I'm coming at you from Cleveland, Ohio. Here in Cleveland, it's one of the largest Ukrainian American communities anywhere in the country. And I have a lot of friends here in the community who have family and other friends back in Ukraine. And, you know, what Putin is doing, slaughtering innocent women and children, targeting apartment buildings that have no military or tactical purpose whatsoever. It's something that I think, you know, both Republicans and Democrats, you know, should be outraged by. And, you know, I don't think we should be putting boots on the ground over there by any stretch. But, you know, the support that conservatives have been behind in sending, you know, Stingers and Avengers and missiles, Patriots and other types of weapon systems, defense systems, you know, I think is appropriate and measured and something we should support.
When it comes to the aid that we're sending to Ukraine, do you think there should be more transparency when it comes to dollars committed and to give the American people kind of where the line is and how far we're willing to go?
I think there should be total transparency. I come at it from two perspectives. You know, one is a Marine Corps vet who did my small part, did a couple tours in Anbar Province, Iraq. But I also come at it from the perspective as a state treasurer of Ohio who led the charge nationally on transparency and shining sunlight on government spending. Here in Ohio, I took the entire state of Ohio's checkbook and I put it on the internet. Everything from $2 for a pack of pencils to millions of dollars for road contracts. I said the taxpayers have a right to know how the tax money is being spent. And I put it all online. Created a website called ohiocheckbook.com and brought transparency, exactly what we need in Washington.
Josh, you're in the midst of a fascinating race for Senate in Ohio. How are you feeling going into your primary on Tuesday?
We're going to win tomorrow. I'm confident we're going to win tomorrow. And I look forward to working with President Trump in the general election to beat the Democrats, beat Tim Ryan, and advance the Trump America First agenda.
Josh Mandel, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas says he's preparing for an influx of illegal immigrants that will likely come after Title 42 is terminated. Title 42 allows Border Patrol to turn illegal immigrants back to Mexico if they are considered a public health threat. Mayorkas told CNN yesterday that the agency is preparing for an estimated surge of 18,000 illegal border crossings each day.
There is no question that if, in fact, we reach that number, that is going to be an extraordinary strain on our system. But we are preparing for it.
A few members of his own party are concerned that Homeland Security is not ready for a massive jump in illegal immigration. Republicans in Congress are fighting for legislation to keep Title 42 in place. And some Republicans said if they take back the House in November, they will impeach Mayorkas for failing to secure the border. Today, President Biden praised federal employees for using their talents for public service. In a virtual ceremony, Biden presented awards to 230 recipients from 37 different agencies. The Presidential Rank Award recognizes exceptional performance of some of the most senior employees in the federal government. Each honoree is first nominated by their cabinet secretary or agency head and evaluated by the Office of Personnel Management.
These awards are about more than individual recognition. They're a reminder to all of us, to everyone, of the extraordinary capacity, creativity, diversity, and dedication of our federal workforce.
MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell rejoined Twitter on Sunday. He gained tens of thousands of followers within minutes before his account was suspended. And before the Twitter takeover by Elon Musk is finalized, some are still hoping the deal falls through. And some Senate Democrats say they want Musk to appear before them on Capitol Hill to undergo a round of questioning before the buyout is final. The White House press correspondent's gala returns, and President Biden laughed off some of the jokes made at his own expense.
Well, Republicans seem to support one fellow, some guy named Brandon. He's having a really good year.
Hello and welcome back to NTD's Capitol Report. Twitter has suspended and removed Mike Lindell again, less than a day after the MyPillow CEO set up a new account. Lindell rejoined Twitter on Sunday and amassed 20,000 followers within minutes, only to be removed from the platform a short time later. Lindell is a loyal supporter of former President Trump. He was permanently banned from Twitter in January 2021 for his efforts to expose election irregularities. Twitter said Lindell's new account was suspended because it violated the permanent ban. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has been taking heat over the crisis on the southern border. Another issue he is drawing criticism from is creating what some are calling a Ministry of Truth, a reference to the same ministry in the Orwellian classic 1984. He took to Fox News Sunday to try and explain.
This is a working group that takes best practices to make sure that in addressing disinformation that presents a threat to the homeland, our work does not infringe on free speech.
Some critics are asking if the introduction to this new working group, as the secretary calls it, was prompted by the takeover of Twitter by billionaire Elon Musk. To break it down, earlier we sat down with pastor and author Lucas Miles. Pastor Lucas Miles, thank you so much for joining us in the Capitol Report.
Good to be here.
Now, I just want to ask you, what do you think has the Democrats so riled up about Elon Musk's Twitter takeover? This guy, he's not an ideologue. If anything, over the years, he's leaned closer to the left.
Yeah, I mean, he's admitted supporting Obama, especially in his first term. I think that what we're seeing with their concern about Musk is he can't be bought, is what it appears. And I think that always makes people on the left nervous when they have somebody who thinks for themselves, who doesn't necessarily just get in line on every single issue. And even though he probably has some left of center views for maybe some conservatives, he still is very much pro-freedom and pro-freedom of speech. And I think that makes the left nervous. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this comes out, because, you know, Musk, obviously, he's sort of a wild card. You don't really know what he's going to do next. And I think he likes it that way.
Now, Senate Democrats are talking about hauling him in for a hearing to question him in front of Congress. What do you think they're trying to achieve by doing this?
I mean, what's interesting, first of all, is that, you know, they weren't hauling in, previous social media figures, or at least hauling these guys in when they're, kicking off Americans off of a platform, but allowing, say, North Korea or, Putin to remain, or whatever that is. And so I think that what we're seeing here is this double standard that exists on the left, that they continue to, really just push policies that are going to benefit them and benefit their narrative and really restrict freedom of speech. And so it'll be interesting to see if Musk, complies with this, if he shows up, if he's willing. I don't see the guy being afraid of a stage or a platform to share his perspective. But I think it's going to be just very interesting waters, that they're wading in right now.
Now, the Biden administration has just announced that they're going to be establishing this disinformation board. Some say that it could be in reaction to the Twitter takeover by Musk, and fears that, information is going to start flowing freely again. Governor DeSantis of Florida said that he is going to do everything he can to prevent this. What power, or what do you think state-level officials can do?
It's one of the great things about America is that we have state power. And I think that as long as, there's elements of our Constitution that are still allowed to play out in this country, states have the right to, be able to take certain stands on this. And obviously, DeSantis has no problem, enforcing his own rights within the limits of law, to be able to do so. It is interesting, the timing of this, when you see how, the start of sort of this disinformation board, what's being called this Ministry of Truth, and compared to, what we saw in the Third Reich and other, dictatorships in the past. The timing of this with the takeover of Twitter, I think, is very suspect. But I think Americans have the right to be concerned about this, and I think that this is something we have to watch closely. And there's really no place for this left or right. The best thing for freedom of speech is the free market, is the free press, and there's always going to be opinions out there that maybe have more weight than others. But I think this is where it puts the onus back on the American people to think for themselves and do their homework.
So what has you most concerned about this? You just said that it didn't matter if it was the left or the right. So you're saying if the Republicans established something, you'd be equally against it?
Yeah, 100%. I don't think that, it is the place of the government to, control the propaganda. I mean, it's one thing to have a PR team, to be able to put messaging out there and those things. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is actually controlling and regulating, in theory. This is under the Department of Homeland Security. In theory, what the American people's ability is to share stories or news, and now that they don't have a place like Twitter in their back pocket, I think they're now looking to do this on a policy level, which I think is even more dangerous than what we saw with big tech.
Do you think that it's too far to say that this could be the entry point for communism, or is it a slippery slope?
I think we've been on the slippery slope for socialism in this country for some time. I think that, critical theory has allowed it to take root in our schools. It's in, we see corporations like Disney and Netflix that have embraced elements of this. And I think that, this is a culture war like we've never had before. I mean, Reagan said it best, every generation has to defeat socialism or communism, and we're in that fight right now ourselves.
Pastor Lucas Miles, thank you.
Thank you.
The White House press correspondents' dinner returned last Saturday night. President Biden joined the dinner as the first president in 6 years. Biden made light of the criticisms he has faced in the past 15 months, one of which is his sliding approval rating.
I'm really excited to be here tonight with the only group of Americans with a lower approval rating than I have.
Biden also talked about the "Let's Go Brandon" slogan.
Well, Republicans seem to support one fellow, some guy named Brandon. He's having a really good year, and I'm kind of happy for him.
Comedian Trevor Noah and the president both headlined the event. The White House Correspondents Association skipped the dinner for the last 2 years because of the pandemic. Former President Trump chose not to attend while he was in office. Former President Donald Trump is being charged $10,000 per day until he hands over business documents being sought by New York Attorney General Letitia James. The fines began last Tuesday. Trump and two of his lawyers filed affidavits with New York's Supreme Court saying that searches of inventories did not produce any of the documents the Attorney General is seeking. But New York Supreme Court Judge Arthur Engoron rejected the affidavits. Engoron said they lacked sufficient detail about how and where the search was made or where Trump kept his files. Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson may be entering the 2024 race for president. The Republican governor told CNN's State of the Union that the possibility of running against former President Trump will not dissuade him. Hutchinson said that former President Trump did a lot of good things for the country, but he thinks the U.S. needs to go in a different direction. Hutchinson was the Department of Homeland Security's first undersecretary for Border and Transportation Security from 2003 to 2005. Alongside Governor Asa Hutchinson, former Vice President Mike Pence, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and Maryland Governor Larry Hogan are all possible Republican presidential candidates. And that's all we have for you on the Capitol Report this evening. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to check out our Capitol Report podcast across all major platforms. I'm your host, Steve Lance. Have a great evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.